Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to my first YouTube Live. If you don't know me already, I'm Matt Pschuta. I'm a local real estate agent based in York County, Pennsylvania. I'm licensed for the entire state, and I work with Inch & Co. Real Estate. Normally, I do live videos on TikTok, but I thought, hey, why not stop in on YouTube and show you guys some love here too? Since I do post videos here, I'm getting a little bit more regular with it. Hopefully, we can make it a twice a week thing on YouTube for videos. And I do have several upcoming ones that are coming out soon. So let's just jump into the numbers. There is a lot of information out in the news, in social media about what's going on with the real estate market. There's talks about, are we going to see rate cuts? Is there a housing emergency? We can jump into some of those things as we go through. Sorry, I'm going to be talking a lot, so I'll probably have a sip of my drink here and there. So we'll talk about some of those things tonight, as well as what we're seeing here locally in York County. The thing to always keep in mind and remember is that all real estate's local. Whatever's happening on the national stage is not necessarily what's happening in your backyard. And that's why realtors are a trusted resource. We are living and working in the communities and transacting in the real estate marketplace. So we have a better understanding of what's really happening in our areas and where we work. Just because homes are sitting for 30 plus days nationally doesn't mean that's what's happening here in York. Homes that might be sitting in Florida are not necessarily what's sitting here. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're thinking about real estate. Is all real estate's local. National headlines do make some differences, but there's also a lot of misinformation out there on that as well. So let's talk about showings first, because that's always one of the big first numbers we want to talk about. And last week, we had 1,813 showings. Not too bad. It's actually up from the week before, where we had 1,708. And then the year before, we were at 1,866. So we're technically down from last year's showings, but we're up from last week. So what does that tell us, right? It's just a number. But what it tells me is that, one, buyers are still in the marketplace. If you're a seller, this is still good news. Buyers are still interested in buying homes. We've got steady amounts of showings that are happening. So that's great news. If you're a buyer, that lets you know that you still have competition out there, right? No one's backing off. So if you find a home you really love at a price point you really love, you're going to need to make that move. You can't sit on the sidelines for too long. Next one is the number of new listings, right? It was a little warm up here. I'm actually up on our third floor, and I turned the AC off when I was filming some of my videos last week and forgot to turn it back on. So now it's warm up here. So new listings, that's the number of new properties that are hitting the market each week. Last week, we had 137 new ones hit the market, which is up from the week prior, where we only had 128. And that's actually down, though, from last year. So what we were starting to see earlier in August and in July is we started to see some inventory start to loosen up. We started to see more properties hit in the market, which was a good sign. At least if you are a buyer, it was a good sign. More inventory means less competition, makes it a little bit better for you as a buyer when you have more choices. But we are starting to see that start to dwindle down. Now, what does that mean? What do I think it means? Well, the first thing on the number of new listings is we're transitioning from the summer market into a fall market. And we normally see right around the school year beginning that we're going to see a little bit of drop off on new homes listed in the market. We've got families have a lot of things going on during that time period. So they're not always necessarily looking to list their home and disrupt things. So we are starting to see that. I was seeing positive traction on the market as a whole, which was a good thing. But now we're starting to see that dwindle down. If I see that a few weeks in a row, that might mean something. But this, first time, I'm not too concerned. I need to see. Sorry, I needed to adjust something on my screen. Just getting used to all of the interface. on YouTube. Sorry. So contracts. So what's it mean when we're talking about the number of contracts? That is how many homes actually went and submitted a contract and went into a purchase agreement, essentially. Both the buyer and seller have agreed. So what we saw last week, we saw 17. It's a little bit lower than the week before, where we had 18, but we had 20 the year before. So what does that mean? Well, for me, it's letting me know that buyers are being a little bit more cautious. They're not jumping on every last thing that they see. They're holding back just a little bit. But if you have the right priced home, it's going to sell quickly. So if you're a seller, that's one thing I really want you to hear and take away, that homes that are priced very, very well, that are staged well, that look well, that are clean, those are the homes that are flying off the market. So you're going to hear me mention that about the right priced home leaving the market quickly, and it's just something to keep in mind if you are thinking about selling. Now, median days to contract. That's saying, we talk about that as one of the numbers that we talk about. Like you've heard me mention, if you've watched some of my prior videos, how we were seeing, 7 days on market, but that number can lag when let's say a home was listed for sale in July. It doesn't sell in July, it goes into August. And if it doesn't sell in August, but it finally sells in September, that number, when it gets reported for September, is going to show that it was on market 60 plus days. But while it's sitting in between, it's not going to affect that number. So when we look at monthly numbers, there's a bit of a lag. But when we start to look at weekly numbers, that's where we're seeing median days to contract. And that's what I like to hone in on a little bit more. So it's still pretty quick, right? So we're looking at 17 days is the median, where it is on the day from when it's listed until it's under contract. So that we're seeing a median day of 17. It's a little bit faster than the week before, which makes sense with school getting ready to start, where it was 18. But last year it was 20. Again, a little bit of a different market. So we're still seeing high amounts of competition. And again, if your home is priced right, you're going to be on that lower number. So 7 or less might even happen for you. We're still seeing it. We're still seeing demand for showings very quickly on the homes in different price points. So while we're talking about price point, what do we see? Right, we're seeing prices are still going up. Last year, the median list price was $304,900. Last week, it was $269,950, which was a bit of a dip. But we also had some investment properties and some others that happened 2 weeks ago. And then last week, it was $310,000. So York County has been sitting right around $300,000 as a median price point. So it's still creeping up, right? So if you've been on the sidelines and you're looking, just remember each year that you sit, that home's going to continue to appreciate in value, regardless of what's happening with the interest rates. And that's something to keep in mind. Like, I'm never going to be the one to tell you to make a poor financial decision, to not think everything through. But if the interest rate is what's keeping you back, you're going to be able to refinance out of an interest rate, but you're not going to be able to negate any appreciation that the home's had in value. Like, that's the big thing to really think about, right? The home might go up $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 before you're ready to buy, but that interest rate, did you save $50,000 in interest or $20,000 in interest in that 2 to 3 year time period? Probably not. So, like, while interest rates absolutely affect your monthly payment and your ability to afford, I'm not negating that. I'm just saying weigh your pros and cons. Is a short-term increased monthly payment something you can handle for a couple of years until you refinance, or not? That's all up to your situation. I will never be the type of agent who's going to try to push you into a home or try to get you to buy when it's not right. That's not going to be me. I want you to feel good about what you do and to move on and have a great life in your home. So, active listings now. So let's talk about that, because Last year we had 870. So we were starting to see the market start to soften a little bit, get a little bit better, get a little bit more inventory. But when we look at last year, same week versus the last week on the same prior year, 870 to 829. So definitely a big dip, but up from last week where it was 780. So we had almost 50 more overall listings on the market, which is a good thing. That's helping with inventory. That's helping buyers have more options, which means they're not competing as much against each other when that happens. Now, the interesting one is price reductions. We are starting to see some of that. And it's normally happening when homes have been sitting for too long. They were priced too high, maybe. There's a variety of reasons. Usually being priced too high is the main reason. And last year we saw 10.6%. Last week it was 10.3%. The week before that, it was only 9.5%. But we are starting to see some of that ticking up. So something to keep in mind as you're going into the fall market, if you are a buyer, take a look for things that have been sitting on the market a little bit longer, especially if you're being price conscious. A home that's been sitting on the market might not have something wrong with it. It could be that it was priced too high and that it's been sitting, and that's, why no one wanted to buy it. So now it's sitting for 30 days and maybe there's nothing absolutely wrong other than the price at first. So something to keep in mind if you're budget conscious. Look for those ones that have been sitting on the market for a little bit longer. You might be able to find a really good deal there. If you're a seller, this goes back to price your home correctly for the market. And I'm actually going on a listing appointment tomorrow. I was talking with the seller, potential seller today, about things. And one of the things I talk about is pricing strategy, and that just because we list at one price doesn't necessarily mean you have to take that price. There are plenty of things to think about when it comes to price, and that doesn't necessarily mean what you're going to end with, right? I've been doing this for 9 months now, after having been in the hospitality industry. And I can tell you, when things are priced really well, buyers will start to compete and then they outbid. So you could price your home. Let's say you had a property, end of row townhouse in West York, and you wanted to net you wanted to end up at $190,000. And maybe your agent looks at it, goes through everything, and is like, you know what, we could probably get 190 to 200,000, maybe even more if you wanted. But the agent then asks you, instead of going that high and waiting to see if buyers will bite, why don't we price it a little below that? Because then buyers will look at it and go, wow, this is actually this is a good deal. This is below market value. This is a little bit lower than what we thought. So maybe if they priced at 179, you'd have 2 or 3 buyers who end up competing against one another, and the seller ends up walking away. So just something to keep in mind when you're thinking about pricing your home as a seller. Don't overprice. You're going to end up not where you want to be when it's all said and done, because you're going to have price reduction. You might have to unlist your home, like take your home off the market, maybe try and list it later. And if you're trying to move, that's not the time to try to see, can we get the most out of it either, especially if you're moving out of state. So things to keep in mind as you're preparing to buy or sell this fall. So, like I said, buyer activity is still very steady. Showings are still up versus the prior week. So we still have buyers out in the market. So if you're a seller, that is great news to hear. You've still got buyers out there actively searching for properties. I've got buyers that I've been working with for a while, and we're still out looking. So we're definitely out there viewing properties when they align. So we are seeing sellers listing more homes, which is a nice thing to see. It is starting to affect the inventory, which is always a positive thing. Again, we did see that contracts dipped a little bit, buyers being cautious, so something to keep in mind. Median list price remains strong, slightly climbing, but still strong. And we are seeing a slight rise in, canceled listings. I actually did not mention that one, which was canceled listings. So last year we had 3. This year it was 8. The week before it was 5. So we are seeing some more canceled listings. That does tend to tick up a little bit around the school year starting, because someone's like, okay, I didn't sell it before the end of this summer, so kids are back to school, we're done. So just something to keep in mind. We are seeing some seller adjustments. I did mention earlier, let's talk a little bit about the national news. So national housing emergency. Do we have one? Well, I think it depends. I think it depends on where you are in the country. I think the biggest thing that is affecting from a national housing emergency is affordability. And affordability really comes down to an inventory thing. It's all about supply and demand. Right now, we have more demand than we have supply. But if you listen to the news, I was listening to the news this morning, they were talking about nationally that there was 500,000 more homes for sale than there were buyers. But that really kind of isn't always the case, right? There's the devil's in the details sometimes. Some of those are second homes. Some of those are homes that are way outside of the average person's price point. Like if your average home here, we're talking our median price is 300,000. Homes that are in the 200 to 500,000, not too difficult when we're talking about selling. But you start getting into a $3 million property, that's $3 million property is not in the price bracket for most people. So while that's going to count towards the statistic of how many homes are for sale that people that aren't selling, it's not always not the whole picture. Taxes can be an issue, flooding, insurance. I mean, you've got to think, we're hearing all sorts of things about insurance companies not continuing to carry insurance for people, or the prices becoming astronomical where people can't afford that. So we definitely have an affordability crisis. We also have a massive supply issue. When we're talking about, entry-level homes, I can tell you, like right now, what's happening in our area. I'm working with people who are looking to downsize, for example. They want to downsize to a single-family home. They want to ranch primary. Everything needs to be on the primary floor, first floor living all throughout. And they're competing against first-time buyers, and they're looking to downsize. So we have entry-level buyers and downsizers all trying to compete for these smaller price point homes. And that's not helping, right? A lot of the builders, when we see some of those, some of the builders around here, you're seeing high 3s, low 4s as starting points, 4s, 5s. And that's great, but that's not helping enough first-time home buyers. And first-time home buyer price points, they're harder to come by. And when some of those come up, they're getting outbid and outcompeted with an investor, with people who are looking to buy rentals. So we definitely have to work on that for sure. So do I think we're going to have that answer on the federal level? I don't know. Because real estate is so local, I think that there's a lot more that can be done on local levels, whether that's with zoning boards, whether that's permitting. There's a variety of ways that we could brainstorm and come up with some solutions. But do I think it's going to happen on the national level? Not necessarily. One of the other big topics everyone talks about is cut the interest rate. And it sounds fantastic. But again, the devil's in the details. Because mortgages, which is what everyone wants lower rates on, do not follow the consumer interest rate. So when we talk about the Fed cutting that interest rate, that's for other debt. That is not for mortgage debt. Mortgage debt actually follows the bond market. So what happens is when people feel stable, the bond yield goes low, interest rates are low on the bond because things are secure. When things are in flux, those yields go up because we say, hey, please give us some more money. So those bond rates are up. So cutting interest rates is not necessarily going to cause you as a consumer a lower mortgage rate. Now, that's not to say that cutting interest rates will not have an effect on the housing market as a whole. So for example, a developer who has a credit line of X amount and has X amount for a cash flow, they might benefit from having a rate decrease because now they can use more of their capital, they can use more expenditures, they're not having to spend as much of their money towards debt servicing, which then allows them to either build, do something else. So it can flow back in, and it can help to stimulate the housing market as a whole. But I think the bond rates being affected would be a much easier path forward because just cutting the interest rates won't really affect your mortgage rate. So we kind of need to see, like, when we've had the lowest interest rates for mortgages, it's always been in times of some sort of crisis, right? So the housing market crisis or the pandemic, right? What we have is a lot of people out of work and a lot of things that are panicking. So we lower rates on those bonds. So it's a way to stimulate the economy. So it's not going to be the catch-all that everyone thinks it's going to be with just cutting the interest rates. So something to keep in mind. If you're not following on Facebook, I have my Facebook page. You can always leave a question for a Q&A. You can DM me, text me, send them to me on TikTok, send them to me on here. But I did have some Q&A and things that I had gotten a couple questions on. So one of the things, I actually love this question. It's something I cover in buyer classes. And so that was actually, what's the first step in buying a home? Well, I can tell you the first step if you're working with me is sorry, that was my sign writer falling over. Your first step if you're working with me is going to be get a pre-approval, get pre-approved. That's going to solve a lot of things. One, it lets us know that you're qualified to take people out. And that's not just about us thinking whether or not you're qualified. You have to think about it from this perspective. We are given the access to access someone else's individual home where they still live, likely, to bring people through, to bring strangers into. So having a pre-approval lets us know that you can and you're not going to take things, not like anyone would, but you never know. So we just kind of want to make sure we have that pre-approval that if we're going to ask the seller to, out of nowhere, like with 45 minutes notice or an hour, vacate their home so that you can come through and tour it, the least we can do is make sure that you're qualified to buy that house, right? If you're only approved for $375,000, I can't take you through a $450,000 house. That's not fair to the people who own that house currently. And trust me, there's plenty of houses I would love to step in and walk through and see with all of you, but we have to, if you're working with me, the first step is get pre-approved. If you don't have a lender, you don't know who to talk to, I have several preferred lenders that I like to work with. One of them is really fantastic. And if you're not great with like where I am with my credit, do I need to improve it or what? One of my lenders that I work with, she's fantastic about getting you where you need to be so that maybe right now you can't buy, but maybe 3 months or 6 months or a year from now, she can help position you to be ready to buy. So get pre-approved. It's a great first step if you're working with me. The next one, sorry, I was reading who it came from. Do I really need a realtor to sell my home? It's a great question. Do you need a realtor to sell your home? Nope. You don't. But, see, because there's always a but, right? But do you know all the legal things? Are you aware of the disclosures that need to be made, the lead-based paint, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? A realtor is a concierge, right? If you're using the realtor is the one who is organizing, scheduling, setting up, making sure everything's good for showings, taking care of the marketing for you. Going to be your late night counselor when things aren't going to plan. Your realtor is going to be a lot for you. You don't need to. 10%, well, usually a little bit less. It's closer to like 9. But about just shy of 10% of transactions happen every year without using a realtor. Before I got into this, I used one when I bought. So it's completely your choice. But just understand there's risk. All realtors, we have errors and emissions insurance, so that if anything goes wrong, we've got different insurance and things to help out. So just keep in mind, completely up to you. I wouldn't recommend it, but I also don't recommend driving without a seatbelt. So what upgrades actually add value to my house? That's a really good one. You really need to think about like making things a little bit more neutral in your house. That's the first thing. You know, there are good upgrades and there's bad upgrades, right? Like if you looked at me, I don't want to say bad upgrades. Any upgrade you make to your house for yourself is a good upgrade for you. But if you put in, for example, I don't know, let's do something crazy and off the wall. If you put in a $50,000 custom marble fountain in the center of your powder room and then thought that you should get $50,000 more for your house because you spent $50,000 on the marble fountain in the powder room, that makes no sense to anyone but you. That's a bad upgrade, right? You made something extremely custom for you that you're also trying to get all of your money out of. Now, are there other things we could say don't do, right? Maybe we might say, you might look at me and say, okay, Matt, like the flooring, my carpet in here is awful. I know it's awful. I've had pets. They're gone now, but like I need to replace the carpets. I might say, yes, let's replace the carpets. I might even tell you, you know what? You've got a tight deadline. You need to move in 2 months. Instead of doing that, we'll price it properly and we'll also give a credit on a concession for the flooring. So it's something to keep in mind that like certain upgrades, entryway, make all your light bulbs be the same color, make your towels match. There are small things that you can do, and actually have a video on it, or it's coming out shortly on like 10 easy things that you can do like before listing your home. It might not be 10, it might be 7. It's a thing on listings and what upgrades and things you can do to your house to get ready, that are kind of quick, easy tips, so that you should do. Next one is, should I wait until spring to sell? You know, you heard me talk about how we're going into the fall market, and sometimes when we go into fall and winter, we see a little bit less listings. I don't necessarily know that you need to wait until spring to sell. Like, the thing with a lot of questions, and I know it feels like a cop-out, but it's really not. It's really about what is it that you need, right? Do you need to be out by February? Are you like, I can't do another winter in Pennsylvania, Matt. I need to sell my house. I need to be in Florida by March. Then would listing your house in March make sense? Probably not. So as with most things, that each situation is unique to you. Is now a good time to sell? I don't know. What do you have going on? Let's talk about it, and then we can reach a decision as to whether or not now is a good time to sell. Is now a good time to buy? Well, is it for you? Do you have some money saved up? Is your credit in a good spot? There's a variety of factors that it's easy to boil things down to like, is now a good time? And like, will we use some of those things as like headers and click things and to get you to generate some interest? Yeah, but that's also how we receive the question is now a good time to buy? Well, it all depends on you. It really depends on you. How much do I need for a down payment? That's a really good one. It depends on the program. It depends on the lender. So for example, if you're looking at a USDA loan, which a lot of your county does qualify for a lot of USDA loans, you can do a USDA loan for 0% down, for example. If you're doing a VA loan, you could do it for 0% down if you're a veteran. If you're doing FHA, you can do 3.5%. There are some conventionals that are 3%. I was working with a buyer recently that had a 30-year conventional with a 0% down. So it really depends on the lender. There are a lot of lenders and a lot of programs out there. So you can, depending on what you're looking for and where your credit score is, you could be looking at anywhere from 0 to 20% down. Could you put 70% down? Absolutely. If you just got a windfall, an inheritance, and wanted to put all of it into a house, could you do it? Absolutely. But you could also do it for as low as 0% down, depending on the loan type and where you're, where things stand for you. But also remember, on the other side, there's usually a trade-off, right? For most things. A lot of times with lower interest rates, you're going to have a mortgage insurance of some type that might be on there for a length of time. But just something to keep in mind. But there are options that are out there. So, yeah. You guys have any questions? Anyone want to pop anything in the chat? Any questions I can answer that I haven't already kind of gone over? No? All right. Well, I guess that'll do it for this week's. And I will see you guys in the next video, or I'll see you on the next live. Thanks for stopping in tonight, guys.